The human mind has an insatiable hunger for closure. We lie awake at night, haunted by questions without answers, mysteries that gnaw at our consciousness like persistent wounds that refuse to heal. For years, certain cases have captured our collective imagination, spawning countless theories, documentaries, and sleepless nights spent scrolling through internet forums desperate for any new clue. But sometimes, just sometimes, the universe grants us what we've been desperately seeking: the truth. What you're about to read are 5 stories that once seemed destined to remain forever shrouded in mystery. Cases that baffled investigators, tormented families, and captivated the public for years, even decades. These aren't just cold cases that got solved. These are the stories that prove no matter how dark the mystery, no matter how long the wait, justice has a way of surfacing when we least expect it. Eliza Chen was 21 years old when she made the decision that would ultimately lead to her death. A student from British Columbia with dreams as bright as the California sun she was chasing, Eliza had always been the kind of person who lived life on her own terms. In January 2013, she packed her bags and headed south to Los Angeles, ready to explore the city she'd only seen in movies. Her parents received daily updates, photos of palm trees, Hollywood signs, and Eliza's radiant smile. But Eliza was carrying invisible baggage that no Instagram filter could hide. She had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and the medication that kept her stable had become sporadic. When she checked into the Cecil Hotel near downtown Skid Row, she initially shared a room on the 5th floor. Her roommates soon noticed troubling behavior. Eliza began leaving strange notes, "Go home and go away," written in increasingly erratic handwriting. She would lock the room's door and create elaborate password systems, paranoid that someone was trying to get in. After 2 days, her roommates complained to management, and Eliza was moved to a room of her own. The episodes continued. She made her way to a live taping of Conan O'Brien's show, but was escorted out for disruptive behavior. The bright, carefree girl from social media was disappearing, replaced by someone increasingly disconnected from reality. January 31st, 2013, was supposed to be Eliza's checkout day. She had plans to drive to Santa Cruz, and her parents were expecting their usual daily check-in call. But the call never came. When Eliza's frantic parents contacted the LAPD, police began an extensive hotel search. They combed through her room and brought in dogs to search the entire building, including the rooftop. The dogs detected something, but they couldn't pinpoint where Eliza had gone. She had simply vanished. 2 weeks passed with no leads. Then, on February 13th, the LAPD released security footage from one of the Cecil Hotel's elevators, the last known sighting of Eliza alive. For 2.5 minutes, viewers watched Eliza exhibit increasingly bizarre behavior. She pressed every button on the panel, peered out into the hallway with visible paranoia, and made strange gestures as if communicating with someone who wasn't there. The internet exploded with theories. Demon possession, government conspiracies, supernatural forces. Nothing was too far-fetched for amateur detectives. But while the internet spun wild tales, guests at the Cecil were experiencing something very real and disturbing. The water pressure had dropped significantly. Some reported that their tap water had turned black and carried a metallic taste that made them gag. On February 19th, a maintenance worker climbed to the roof to investigate the water issues. What he found there would haunt him forever. Floating face up in one of the 4 1,000-gallon water tanks was Eliza's body. Guests realized they had been drinking, bathing, and brushing their teeth with contaminated water for days. The discovery seemed impossible to explain. How had a young woman accessed a locked rooftop and gotten into a sealed tank? Conspiracy theories multiplied, but as investigators dug deeper, the tragic truth emerged. Eliza had been severely under-medicating for her bipolar disorder. She had experienced similar episodes before, disappearances that ended with hospitalization. The rooftop access wasn't as secure as it appeared. Fire escape routes provided alternate paths, and tracking dogs confirmed Eliza had used one to reach the roof. When a maintenance worker found her, the tank lid was open, not sealed as internet sleuths had assumed. The heartbreaking truth was simpler than any conspiracy. Eliza, in the midst of a severe episode, had climbed into the tank during a moment when her grasp on reality had completely slipped away. There were no demons or mysteries, just a young woman struggling with mental illness when no one was there to help her. But not all mysteries end in such heartbreak. Sometimes, justice arrives decades later, bringing closure to families who never stopped believing. The summer of 1974 was supposed to be filled with beach days for 12-year-old Jenny Sullivan, vacationing in Provincetown, Massachusetts. On July 26th, her family's golden retriever led her to a gruesome discovery in the Race Point Dunes. The decomposing body of a woman lay on a beach blanket, but this wasn't natural death. Both hands had been severed, teeth meticulously removed, and massive trauma had crushed half her skull. A blue bandana and Wrangler jeans were tucked underneath her head. The woman became known as the Lady of the Dunes, and her case consumed investigators for generations. Her body was exhumed 4 times as forensic technology advanced. The deliberate removal of hands and teeth was calculated, designed specifically to prevent identification. Whoever killed this woman wanted to ensure she would never be found, never be mourned, never receive justice. Suspects emerged over the years. James Whitey Bulger, the notorious Boston mobster known for removing victims' teeth. Anthony Costa, a serial killer operating in Massachusetts during the 1970s. Even Haddon Clark, a convicted murderer who confessed to the crime, taunting investigators by saying he could have revealed her identity years earlier. But none of these suspects proved to be the killer. On October 31st, 2022, Halloween, fittingly enough, the FBI made an announcement that sent ripples through law enforcement. After nearly 50 years, the Lady of the Dunes had been identified. Her name was Ruth Marie Terry. Ruth had been a young woman with her whole life ahead of her when she married Guy Rockwell Malden in 1973 or 1974. They were supposed to be on their honeymoon, but it became Ruth's death sentence. The identification opened a floodgate of information about Malden, revealing a predator who had been killing for decades. As far back as 1950, Malden had been suspected of killing truck driver Henry Lawrence Redford and kidnapping his 17-year-old girlfriend, Barbara Jo Kelly. In 1960, his second wife and her daughter mysteriously disappeared in Seattle. Investigators found dismembered body parts in Malden's septic tank, but couldn't prove they belonged to the missing women. When Malden returned from his honeymoon with Ruth in 1974, he was driving her car, but traveling alone. When questioned about Ruth's whereabouts, his stories were inconsistent and cold. He told some people she had died, others that they'd had a fight, and he never heard from her again. After Ruth's murder, Malden relocated to California, where he eventually became an executive vice president of a silver store on Rodeo Drive. He retired comfortably in 1985 and lived peacefully until his death in 2002. For nearly 30 years after Ruth's murder, Guy Rockwell Malden lived free and successful while Ruth remained nameless in a grave. But death doesn't always mean escape from justice. On August 28, 2023, 21 years after Malden's death, the FBI officially named him as Ruth Marie Terry's killer. While he escaped earthly consequences, he did not escape history's judgment. DNA technology and forensic genealogy had finally given Ruth her name back and exposed her killer, proving that sometimes justice is patient, waiting decades to reveal itself. Sometimes, the most satisfying resolution comes from catching someone whose crimes endangered countless innocent people driven by greed and obsession. Forrest Fenn understood the power of human obsession. An art dealer from Santa Fe, New Mexico, in 2010 he filled a bronze chest with gold coins and gems worth up to $2 million and hid it somewhere in the Rocky Mountains. Rather than leave a map, he wrote a poem containing 9 cryptic clues. The response was overwhelming. Tens of thousands flocked to the mountains, armed with metal detectors and their own interpretations of Fenn's verses. For many, it became an obsession that consumed their lives, savings, and rational thought. But obsession in the unforgiving Rocky Mountains proved deadly. Randy Bilyeu was the first to die, going missing in January 2016 while searching along the Rio Grande. Jeff Murphy from Illinois was found dead in Yellowstone after falling 500 feet down a steep slope. Pastor Paris Wallace of Colorado was discovered downstream along the Rio Grande. Eric Ashby, who moved to Colorado to search full-time, was found dead in the Arkansas River. Michael Wayne Sexton was the fifth victim, found dead alongside his companion in March 2020. The mounting death toll weighed heavily on Fenn. The New Mexico State Police chief publicly implored him to end the hunt, stating he was putting lives at risk. But one man was determined to end it by actually finding the treasure. Jack Stuff was different from most treasure hunters. A medical student from Michigan and former BuzzFeed Unsolved writer, he approached Fenn's poem with methodical precision rather than letting obsession cloud his judgment. His scientific thinking and careful analysis proved successful where thousands had failed. On June 6, 2020, Fenn announced the treasure had been found. Stuff initially remained anonymous for safety reasons, but a lawsuit forced his hand. In December 2020, he publicly revealed himself as the finder. His success proved that patience and methodical thinking could triumph over reckless obsession. The treasure hunts brought complex emotions. Relief that the deadly obsession could finally end. Satisfaction that intelligence had triumphed over desperation. Sadness for the families who lost loved ones. Jack Stuff's victory showed that the greatest treasures come to those who approach challenges with wisdom rather than blind ambition. But sometimes, the most chilling mysteries involve calculated cruelty where human beings become expendable pawns in twisted games. Brian Wells was just trying to make an honest living, delivering pizzas in Erie, Pennsylvania. At 46, he wasn't chasing dreams of wealth, just paying bills like millions of Americans. On August 28, 2003, a routine delivery call would turn him into the victim of one of the most bizarre crimes in American history. The call came during the afternoon, a pizza ordered to a transmission shop. Wells had no idea he was driving toward nightmare. At 1:30 p.m., he walked into the PNC Bank on Peach Street wearing what appeared to be a collar around his neck and carrying a cane that was actually a crude shotgun. Wells waited in line, sucking on a lollipop with surreal calm. When he reached the teller, he slid over a note. The device around his neck was a bomb that would explode in 15 minutes unless he received $250,000. The teller could only access $8,702, which Wells accepted without complaint. As he left, witnesses reported he swung the money bag around like Charlie Chaplin, a cheerful gesture that seemed completely at odds with the deadly situation. 15 minutes later, police spotted Wells beside his car and handcuffed him. He tried to explain that 3 people had forced the collar bomb around his neck and coerced him into the robbery, but his story seemed too bizarre to believe. Then police found 9 pages of handwritten instructions addressed to bank robber, detailing an elaborate scavenger hunt that Wells was supposed to complete to prevent detonation. The most chilling line read, "Act now, think later, or you will die." The bomb squad was called, but traffic proved fatal. At 3:18 p.m., just 3 minutes before expert help arrived, the collar exploded. The blast tore a hole in Wells' chest the size of a human fist. He died almost instantly, victim of a real-life Saw movie scenario. Later analysis revealed the true cruelty. The scavenger hunt was impossible to complete in time. Even if Wells had never gone to the bank, he couldn't have found all the keys to disarm the bomb. He was literally a dead man, walking from the moment the collar was locked around his neck. The break came a month later when William Rothstein called 911 to report a frozen body in his garage freezer. His suicide note opened with a telling disclaimer. This has nothing to do with the Wells case. The denial before being asked immediately made him a suspect. The conspiracy unraveled through Rothstein's ex-girlfriend Marjorie Deal Armstrong, who agreed to cooperate in exchange for prison transfer. She revealed that the collar bomb plot was designed to raise $250,000 to pay for a hit on her father so she could inherit his money. They needed someone expendable to carry out the robbery, someone whose death wouldn't matter if things went wrong. Brian Wells seemed perfect. They chose him not because he was criminal or had wronged them, but because his life seemed disposable. According to the investigation, Wells believed the bomb would be fake, a prop to make the robbery seem legitimate. He had no idea his partners planned to murder him to eliminate witnesses. Marjorie was convicted and sentenced to life in prison, where she died in 2017. Kenneth Barnes received a reduced sentence for cooperation. Rothstein died of cancer before full prosecution. But for Brian Wells, justice came too late. He had been murdered simply because evil people decided his life was expendable. Perhaps no case better demonstrates justice's long arc than the murder that defined a generation and remained unsolved for nearly 3 decades. September 7, 1996, was supposed to be celebration night. Tupac Shakur, one of hip-hop's most influential artists, was in Las Vegas with Death Row Records CEO Suge Knight to watch Mike Tyson fight at the MGM Grand. At 25, Tupac was at his career peak, having just released the double album All Eyes on Me. After Tyson's quick knockout victory, Tupac and Suge spotted Orlando Anderson, a Southside Crips member, in the casino lobby. Anderson had recently tried to steal a Death Row chain from a Blood Gang member. Trayvon Lane pointed Anderson out to Tupac, who approached and asked, "You from the South?" When Anderson didn't respond quickly enough, Tupac punched him, dropping him to the floor where he was beaten by the Death Row entourage. It felt like street justice, but it would prove fatal. Orlando Anderson's uncle, Dwayne "Keffy" D. Davis, was also in Vegas that night, and he wasn't the kind of man who would let an attack on his nephew go unanswered. Davis was sitting in a nearby restaurant when word reached him. As he later confessed, the attack made everything ominously personal. The problem was Davis and his crew hadn't brought weapons to Vegas. Their trip was strictly social. That's where Eric "Zip" Martin entered the story. The East Coast drug dealer had come prepared, with a .40 caliber Glock hidden in his Mercedes-Benz. For the next hour and a half, 2 cars of Crips staked out Club 662, where Tupac was supposed to perform, but he never showed. Eventually 1 car left, but 4 men remained in a white Cadillac. Terrence "Bubble Up" Brown driving, Davis in the passenger seat, DeAndre "Big Dre" Smith and Orlando Anderson in back. As they drove back toward the strip along East Flamingo Road, fate intervened cruelly. Just after 11 p.m., Davis spotted a black BMW at a red light. Hanging out the passenger window was Tupac, chatting with girls in a passing car, completely unaware his killers were pulling alongside. Brown accelerated into the right lane next to the BMW. Davis handed the Glock to Anderson. As both cars slowed, Anderson reached across Big Dre and fired through the open window, hitting Tupac 4 times, twice in the chest, once in the arm, once in the thigh. Suge Knight was hit by bullet fragments but survived. Tupac fought for his life for 6 days before dying on September 13, 1996. Orlando Anderson became the prime suspect, but denied involvement and was never charged. He was killed in 1998 in an unrelated gang shooting. 6 months later, Biggie Smalls was also killed in Los Angeles, leading to conspiracy theories about an escalating East Coast-West Coast war. The case remained cold until 2006, when the LAPD decided to prove they hadn't killed Biggie by figuring out who actually had. Detective Greg Kading joined a task force that would finally unlock Tupac's murder secrets. The breakthrough came through focusing on Dwayne "Keffy" D. Davis, who was living comfortably in Southern California running a $1 million drug network. Rather than approach him about murders directly, they built an overwhelming drug case against him. When confronted in 2008, Davis faced life in prison unless he cooperated. In exchange for a proffer agreement, Davis revealed everything. He confirmed being in the car when Tupac was shot and that Orlando Anderson pulled the trigger. But he also made shocking claims about Sean Diddy Combs allegedly offering a $1 million bounty for Tupac and Suge's deaths during the 1995 Summer Jam tour. However, Davis clarified that Tupac's actual murder wasn't a murder for hire. It was personal revenge for Orlando's beating. When Detective Kading asked directly if it was a contract killing, Davis replied, "No." On September 29, 2023, almost exactly 27 years after Tupac's death, Dwayne "Keffy D. Davis was arrested and charged as the leader who orchestrated the killing. The arrest brought closure to one of America's most famous unsolved murders, proving that even the most complex cases can eventually be solved through persistent investigation and criminals' inevitable failures to keep secrets forever. The resolution of these 5 cases, from Eliza Chen's tragic death to Tupac's murder, demonstrates that closure, while sometimes elusive, is always possible. Whether through advances in forensic technology, patient investigative work, or criminals' own mistakes, truth has a way of emerging from even the darkest mysteries. Each story reminds us that behind every unsolved case is real human suffering. Families searching for answers, communities torn apart by violence, victims whose stories deserve complete telling. When cases are finally solved, they don't just provide closure to those directly affected. They restore faith in justice's possibility and persistence's power. In a world that often feels chaotic and unfair, these solved mysteries prove that patience, dedication, and relentless truth-seeking can triumph over even the most carefully concealed crimes. They show us that no matter how long it takes or how many obstacles stand in the way, justice finds its path. So the next time you read about an unsolved mystery, remember these stories. Remember that investigators are still working, technology is advancing, and truth is waiting to be discovered. Remember that justice may be slow, but it is also inevitable. And thanks for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments section below. If you haven't already, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. We upload new content daily, covering cases you know and many you don't. Stick with us as we bring you more stories that deserve to be heard. See you in the next video.